Okay, so for starters, my name is JT Eberhard. Every other speaker that ever does this type of thing, oftentimes their presentation is either a thickly or thinly veiled advertisement for their books. Not to mention any names. But I don't have any books, but I do have a blog, What Would JT Do? It's kind of swell. And I'm live blogging the Rapture today, which is how I knew that none of the other Raptures were happening elsewhere, not because it's stupid. But Jen McCride is one of my best friends on the atheist speaking circuit, and she's speaking out at the Oakland Bay Area Ram today. And she's at Jenna Furret on Twitter. And so if everyone who has Twitter wants to bust out their phones now and text something at her with the hashtag JTWins, I won't be offended. I promise. What's next? I work for the Secular Student Alliance. I'm a campus organizer, the high school specialist. Yes. The most pimpin' of all the campus organizing groups, because it's one of two, and they're both kind of awesome. Give us money. We need it. We're an entirely member-based organization. You can become an annual member for $35, and I can take your debit cards right out there. And lastly, I also blog at atheismresource.com, which has been known to occasionally bear a post from David Fitzgerald as well, and it's a really great website. What else did I want to talk about? First thing, real quick, I'm going to try and amuse you for 30 or so minutes while I give this talk on religion and whatnot. But I don't know how many of you know this, but whatever surplus funding they have for Rapture Day goes to an organization called the Mental Health Association. And I wanted to make a quick personal appeal to give money even above and beyond what you might have already donated, because I'm crazy. And I'm not saying that in jest. I have a mental disorder that I've recently come out publicly about that has, quite frankly, destroyed some years of my life. And thank you to Better Living Through Science. It works. Who knew? I take a little pill every night that keeps me from panicking when I eat. And thankfully, I'm on top of my condition now, and it allows me to function and get up on stage and talk about religion and play piano poorly. But there's a culture, I don't want to say a culture, but an existing idea in the United States right now in regards to mental health that the fault lies with the victim, that if they could just try a little harder, they could be well. And a lot of people, including myself, not anymore, but at one point, buy into this. And it keeps us from getting the help we need that can help us to live a normal life. And it keeps us, people with mental conditions hide their condition. They don't want to be a burden to anybody. And it keeps them in that closet. And it keeps them isolated and keeps them alone. And frankly, it ends and destroys lives. So if you've got even $5 extra you weren't going to do anything with, throw it in the pot, not only to keep events like this running, but because any surplus goes to that group that helps people like me and people in the position I was in. So now we're going to listen to the guy who just spent forever telling us that he's crazy. I wrote this talk for Skepticon 3, and it came at the end of 2010 when I had spent pretty much the whole year going to church, if not every weekend, every other weekend. And when they stood up to sing, I would not stand up to sing. When they stood up to pray, I would not stand up to pray. And so I had a lot of people coming up to me after the service saying, "Well, you're new here. Hi." And they ask you, "Which church do you go to? What do you subscribe to?" And, "Well, I'm an atheist." "Oh. Why?" And we got into this conversation. I said, "Well, I have no reason, I think, to believe this. Why do you believe? Why do you think I should believe?" And if you do this for a year, you either become an alcoholic or you write a talk like this one, because you get the same arguments over and over and over again. And this is going to be kind of preaching to the choir, but these are the arguments, if you go out and be an out atheist, that you're going to encounter. And I hope you're going out and being an out atheist. I think that's very, very important. Some of you will think I'm picking at low-hanging fruit with this talk, but go to a church sometime and talk to the actual believers afterwards. Talk to the preachers afterwards, and you'll soon find that this is really the only fruit on the tree. So, so Dear Christian is really the conversation I'm always having in my head when I'm driving home from church frustrated. So, Dear Christian, we've been having these talks for about a year now, and whenever I ask you why I should believe the things you believe, one of the first things you say is, well, you should respect my beliefs. And you see, this is Bill Donahue right here. I'm so mature. He's the head of the Catholic League. I sent him one of the Skepticon 3 pinup calendars because he generally freaks out about everything, and he didn't do all our advertising for us for Skepticon 4. It was very sad. But the people who ask me to respect their beliefs, I think, have a very wonky definition of respect. Because if an atheist believes something for an insufficient reason, the first thing I do is apprise him to why I think it's an insufficient reason, or her, not to be sexist. But when people ask me to respect their beliefs, a lot of times what I think they want is for me to coddle them or to placate them, rather than telling them the truth. And I don't think that's respect at all. I think that's condescension. I don't think that's something anybody should want. I think well-meaning people should be respected, but ideas don't have any feelings. And since ideas are the lifeblood of humanity, I think we have an obligation in a society that doesn't regulate our speech to provide disrespect for bad ideas. In fact, respecting bad ideas on the whole is far too close to affirming them for my taste. So, So we're not going to respect your beliefs. Sorry. It's the weirdest thing. A lot of times when I ask you, dear Christian, a particular question, you answer a completely different question. For instance, if I ask you, why do you believe the things you believe? A lot of times you'll answer the question, what do you believe? For instance, why should I believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, we believe Jesus had to rise from the dead because Eve ate the apple in original sin. I'm like, that's not the question I asked. If we're going to progress in this conversation, we have to bind it to reasons, and that means you have to answer the questions I'm asking. So work on that, please, pretty please. The other one that comes up a lot is you'll harp on the possibility that your beliefs are true. I mean, isn't it just possible that Jesus walked on water and rose from the dead? And I don't see the utility in that. Of course it's possible. I mean, lots of things have a non-zero possibility chance of being true. I mean, unicorns may be true. I mean, maybe we're just looking in all the wrong forests so far. I mean, we're talking about religion, Charlie. Shun the non-believer. Shun. But we're not arguing just for possibility. We're arguing for plausibility. You need to establish why your beliefs are most likely to be true. So let's get this whole possibility thing out of the way and stop acting like I ever raised it. So why should I believe what you believe? First answer, this is always what you get first. Well, read the Bible. It's all in there. It's this incredibly wise book that has relevant advice and information even for your life today. And it always makes me twitch a little bit when Christians ask me to read the Bible, because the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life in September of 2010 conducted a survey that concluded that atheists knew more about the various religions than the believers of those religions themselves. For instance, come on, PowerPoint, do your thing. 45% of Roman Catholics didn't know that according to church doctrine, the Eucharist, the little cracker in the wine, nom, 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 actually physically turn into the body of Christ, whereas far more atheists knew that. And I was actually reading that, and I was like, I'll bet I knew an atheist that got that one. Over half of the Protestants that took the survey didn't know that it was Martin Luther that kicked off the Protestant Reformation, whereas a lot more atheists knew that. So when you tell me to read the Bible or become familiar with the basic tenets of your faith, it seems highly unlikely to me that you will have some kind of insight that I don't. Because being an atheist speaker and whatnot, I know about how many Christians have read the Bible. And it comes to us from Bill Keller Ministries, which is a Christian institution that has confirmed that less than 10% of believing Christians have read the Bible. Which is really weird because Knowledge Networks, at the behest of Christianity Today, did another survey that confirmed that 74% of Christians believe the Bible is the authoritative guide to faith. It makes me wish there was a part of the Bible that forbid people from pretending to know things that they didn't know. But it's not like you would have read it, dear Christian. But maybe it could help us make a little progress. But it's usually at this point that I confess to you, dear Christian, that I have read the Bible. A couple times, as a matter of fact. I've read it enough to know that it's about 1,200 pages long, which is a hulking read, and I sympathize with you on that. But I can't help but wonder how many Christians have read, say, 2 Harry Potter books. I'll wager it's more than 10%. But no, I have read the Bible, and you always ask me, what's my hang-up with it? You read the Bible, why don't you believe it? And the answer is simple. It makes a bunch of outlandish claims it doesn't support. It talks about people walking on water and rising from the dead. And this is usually where, dear Christian, you tell me, no. The Bible and science are perfectly compatible. I mean, we've all heard him do this. When we did Skepticon 3, this was a quote from the local news that night. And this is their spiel. This is Ray Comfort's whole spiel. That science and the Bible are completely... The banana was designed for your mouth. But you pull this line of science and the Bible being completely compatible, and it just makes me think. I mean, do you not think that biologists might have some issue with a guy rising from the dead? Do you not think that physicists might take issue with somebody walking on water? Do you not think that chemists might just shit a brick at the notion that someone could be turned into a pillar of salt? Or do you not think geologists have anything to say about a global flood that exterminated everybody on the planet and left no evidence whatsoever? And even if you don't think the geologists have something to say about that flood, I'll bet you the historians do have something to say about that flood. Because several what's the word I'm looking for here? Civilizations around that era took copious records of their existence, such as Egypt's 6th dynasty. And for all their meticulous record keeping, they somehow missed being exterminated by a global flood. Resilient folk, those Egyptians. Or take the story in Joshua where the earth was stopped for, was a 24-hour period where the earth was stopped? I mean, this is a question about astronomy, and they have something to say about this. Incidentally, the reason the earth was stopped was so that Joshua and the Israelites could slaughter the Amalekites in one of God's epic land battles, which seems like an awfully weird thing for a loving God to do. But let's examine that last one. When you're telling me the Bible and science are compatible, for the earth to stop would require the violation of the law of angular momentum. There has to be some other force introduced in order to stop the earth. What was it? Well, can we look for evidence? If the earth had stopped, the atmosphere would keep moving. This would produce winds up to about 1,100 miles per hour that would pretty much rip everything, including Joshua and the Amalekites, up into the atmosphere, and would leave some amount of evidence that it happened. We've found none. What about the oceans? They don't stop if the earth stops. You bet that would leave a dent. We haven't found anything. The moon also stopped in that book, and if that happened, the moon would actually fall to the earth, which we might notice that too if we made it that far. But if these things happened, we would notice. So I can't buy your claim, dear Christian, that the Bible and science are compatible. Okay then, smart guy. How did life begin then? Can you explain that? Raise your hand if you've heard this one. Well, it turns out, dear Christian, there's a very simple explanation for how life began. A self-replicating molecule formed when a series of fatty acids congealed into vesicles which, made permeable by convection cycles in a prebiotic earth, trapped nucleotide monomers which self-ligated via hydrogen bonds and covalent bond ligation, polymerizing within the vesicle to form a primitive cell, after which the surrounding ions increased the osmotic pressure, allowing the cell to acquire lipids from other vesicles which catalyzed competition and thus evolution. Simple. Simple. Now, dear Christian, I understand that that whole phrase may come off as little more than word soup to you. And there was a time in my life when it came off as little more than word soup to me. And the way I fixed that is by going to a biology professor at my local university and asking him to explain it to me. He sent me to a chemist to explain it to me, because it turns out it's more chemistry than biology. But eventually, I got to a point where I understood what all this meant. What I didn't do is walk up to any Yahoo music major on the street and say, hey, can you explain this to me? That you do the latter rather than the former tells me that you're not really looking for an answer, that you're looking for an argument from ignorance, which is nothing to be proud of, and it's a terrible argument. Stop it now. Never do that again. All right, but do we have to learn every facet of science ourselves in order to acquire a stable worldview? And the answer is no. There's so much to learn that we can, even if we spent our whole lifetime dedicated to learning all the science, we could never learn it. And most of us don't do that. I'm a music major. Go figure. Way less profitable, by the way. So what we can do is we can defer to experts. And we all live our lives this way. Even you, dear Christian. Every time you step onto an airplane, you're deferring to the wisdom of physicists. Every time you eat a cheeseburger, you're deferring to the wisdom of people who understand germ theory. And there's nothing wrong with that. But all of a sudden, when we get into things like abiogenesis and evolution, well, then suspicion starts to creep in. And I wonder why. I mean, do you really think that science is the greatest coup in the history of the world? That here for thousands of years, scientists are revealing to us the mysteries of the universe, solving our problems, augmenting the value of our lives, only so that just now, in the 21st century, they can work against God. Mwahahahahaha. I can't believe this proposition seems even remotely plausible to you. So all I'm asking you to do is be consistent. Keep deferring to the experts. But JT, there are religious scientists. And it's true, there are. Here's a couple of them. This is Francis Collins right here on your left, on stage right, and Sir Isaac Newton over there on the left. Both very, very religious people. But the thing is, for their scientific work, these people were posting in peer review. They were writing papers that were being read by other scientists and vetted by other scientists. No religious scientist ever has done this for their work on religion or for their work on belief in God. So this should tell you that they don't believe in God for the scientific reasons. They believe in everything else. Let's just go this route. Here's Lee Strobel. I don't like him. Not a scientist. He's a journalist. And if you read his books, he is making claims that imply overtly that he has the scientific wherewithal to overturn entire scientific disciplines. Why the hell is he telling you, dear Christian? Why is he not going to the scientists who could actually use this information? This should tell us something about the way they work. But JT says, dear Christian, there are scientists writing peer-reviewed papers on this. They work for organizations like this one right here, the Discovery Institute. They're writing peer-reviewed papers. They're doing the science. Hey, now they are a secular institution. You angels, get back there. Bad. Yeah, they're completely secular. Except none of their papers, none of their work has ever passed the muster of peer review. But I can understand where it might be confusing, because here we have people with scientific credentials using big schmancy scientific words and jargon that music majors like me and whatever you do don't really get. And we have scientists on the other side of the spectrum doing the same thing. So how do we know where the experts are? And there's a way we can tell in the way they treat each other. So this interesting-looking man is Grigory Perelman. He's a mathematician, a mathematical badass. Is not underselling him at all. And read his Wikipedia page. He does love ping pong. He plays for hours a day. He is the guy who solved the Poincare conjecture. The Poincare conjecture is one of a series of math problems called the Millennium Prize problems. There's 7 of them. And the Poincare conjecture is the only one that has ever been solved. And this is the guy that did it. His proof for solving it was so complex that it took a team of mathematicians, some of the world's best mathematicians, 4 years just to confirm it as correct. Now, when he came up with his proof, what do you think he did? Do you think he ran off to plumbers and janitors and restaurant workers? Nothing against restaurant workers. I've been one for most of my life. And said, hey, look at this thing I figured out. Can you help me launch a political campaign to get this into textbooks so kids can start reading it? No! He went to mathematicians, people who had spent their lives studying these things, to first ensure that he was correct. And this is what scientists and academics do. Now, when his proof was confirmed as correct, there was $1 million prize on the line for solving it. And so immediately the academic community tried to give it to him, and Perelman shot the prize down. For doing this, he also won the Fields Medal, which is like the Nobel Prize of mathematics. And he shot that down too. And several subsequent efforts have been made by the academic community to get him to accept not only the award, but also the prize money, even just to donate it somewhere else. And each time he's refused. So we have this guy not even seeking accolades for his work, and the academics are trying to foist them onto him. Why are they not doing this to the Discovery Institute? The Discovery Institute is saying, hey, we deserve these accolades. Why are the academics not trying to force them on them? And it's simple. The academics don't buy their story. They don't buy their story at all. They think it's misinformation. They think it's not scientific. And so they don't feel the need to give it, any recognition that real academic accomplishments produce. Which should tell you something when people like the Discovery Institute feed you, the non-scientist, this line of misinformation. They feed it to you because they want you to help spread the misinformation further, which, dear Christian, you've just done by regurgitating it to me. This not only says a tremendous amount about groups like the Discovery Institute, but it says a tremendous amount about what those groups think of you. And in the future, I hope you'll remember who they are and how they operate. So mad. But JT, science is incomplete. It can only handle natural claims. It can't go after the supernatural. And my response to that is simple, dear Christian. We are natural creatures. If God created the world, he created the world with a bunch of hurdles to our existence. Hurricanes that bitch slap us out of nowhere. Tigers with claws that want nothing more than to eat us. And we've survived God's hurdles by using our physical senses, our eyes to see, our ears to hear, our hands to touch, and our minds to think. Why would you create a world where we're entirely dependent on the natural receptors you've given us, and then make the biggest question of our lives dependent on abandoning those natural receptors, on abandoning science? If there is a God who created a heaven and hell, I'll say it colloquially, that's a pretty dick move if he did something like that. But JT, he wants you to believe in him. He wants you to choose to believe in him. And our minds work in the same way a lot of our other natural receptors work, by itself. We don't choose what we believe. That's not the way our brains work. If God created our brains, he made them this way. And if you think you can choose what you believe, try climbing up to, say, the top of this building, or even the top of the piano. That's a pretty far jump for someone like me. And trying to convince yourself by force of will that gravity doesn't work. See how far that gets you. Your brain is an engine that takes the information inside of it and constructs a view of the world all on its own. And you're powerless to do anything else. Otherwise, you could convince yourself that gravity doesn't work. So even if God exists, with this brain he gave me, I can't just choose to believe that someone rose from the dead. I'm powerless to do anything but reject that idea. So this whole idea that we can choose what we believe needs to go by the wayside, and fast. But JT says, dear Christian, look at the world around you. Look at how complex it is, how beautiful. Surely something like this couldn't be the product of mindless forces. Oh, really? Does the world look designed? Well, it certainly looks complex. We've all heard the watchmaker argument. You find the watch on the beach, and it has all these parts, and you conclude that there must be a watchmaker. But the thing is, in nature, mindless forces acting upon inanimate objects produce order all by themselves. A real simple example that comes to us from Victor Stenger, snowflakes. What is the natural form of water? It's not liquid. It's solid, the most complex form of water. The only way this stays in liquid form is if you keep putting energy into the system to keep it in liquid. If you take the energy out, it becomes something far more complex on its own. And the universe works this way too. Take something like the formation of stars. Stars are formed when you have a huge cloud of hydrogen that gets enough mass to produce gravity, so it starts collapsing in on itself. It's called the Jeans instability. And once that cloud of hydrogen starts to collapse, it spikes the pressure in the center, which spikes the temperature, and starts fusing the hydrogen together. And from this completely random cloud of hydrogen, you have something orderly and complex, very orderly and complex, like a star. The universe works this way in a bunch of different systems to produce order all by itself. So when you say to me, could the order in our universe be produced by mindless forces? Obviously. No appeal to God is necessary for these things. So you can't just point to some piece of order and say, there must have been design. And we all know the simple rebuttal to this. If all things complex need a designer, God must be really complex. Where is his designer? What a solution to that problem, a being that doesn't require a designer. Brilliant. Well, you just believe in science, JT. That's your faith. Your religion is science. Is science a matter of faith? No. But why not an explanation? Science makes one assumption, and only one assumption, that the universe operates under a set of rules. And that's it. And if that assumption is correct, it's something we should be able to test. And we do this every time we throw a satellite to the edge of the solar system and hit something the size of a pinhead. Things like this, or whenever we calculate where the path of a hurricane will take it, or how long it will take an airplane to get from point A to point B, we're testing this assumption that the universe operates under a set of rules, and it works every time. And we all know this. It's why even you, dear Christian, if you put your hand on a burning stove one week and burn the crap out of your hand, you're not going to put your hand on the stove again next week because you assume that the universe is going to be consistent. And all I ask is that you stay consistent with that. This is also why if you had an animal speak to you, it would be weird. The universe is consistent. This doesn't happen. It's also after 20 animals spoke to you, you might start to get used to it. So the universe operates under a set of consistent rules. And these rules nullify the idea that someone rose from the dead or walked on water. And it also means that my belief in science and the fact that it works is no longer a matter of faith. It's a matter of confirmable fact. But even after all of this, after all of these arguments have been shot and killed, you have a trump card, dear Christian, the most frustrating, agonizing, painful trump card in the world, and you will hide behind it once all other arguments have been exhausted. There is not enough alcohol in the world. And that trump card is faith. And it strikes me as, odd that you immediately jump to faith. This is noble faith. Sure, it's noble when you use it, but what about when other people use it? Faith doesn't work so well for all these other beliefs. In the hands of every other religion but yours, faith is just the means that people get to an error and maintain that error against all evidence, and even through the use of bad arguments, which you've been feeding to me for the last year, dear Christian. What keeps me from putting you in that other column? I need to have some reason why you believe the things you do. Now, after all of this, and then maybe after some other arguments, the question is inevitable. Why do you care? Why do you take the time to criticize me and my beliefs? Can't you just live and let live? No. I can't. And the reason is something you might not expect. The reason I can't sit by and live and let live is because most religious people are well-meaning people. Now, why is that a problem? It's a problem because being well-intentioned is not enough. Most of you people here read the blogs, you read the news. You know that at the very minimum, every couple months in this country, if not every month, some child catches a disease that is curable through medical technology. And rather than taking the child to the doctor, the parents pray and pray and pray until they pray the child to death. Now, if the word bad is to have any meaningful definition, it can be applied to parents like this. But why? It's not that they didn't love their child. They loved their child as much as any other parent. It's not that they didn't want their child to get well. They wanted their child to get well as much as any other parent. They just had a bad idea about how the universe works. And this is the power of bad ideas, is they can take good intentions and well-meaning people and twist the intentions into malice and the people into monsters. So I can't live and let live because unfounded, unsupported ideas are anathema to human progress. This is why being a well-meaning person is not the same as being a good person. And you, dear Christian, use this all the time. But they're a good person. Who cares if what they believe is wonky? I care. Because it's not enough to be well-intentioned. Because those people are telling the rest of the world that it's okay to believe things for bad reasons. This is antithetical to human success. This is not the type of world in which human beings flourish, where bad ideas are allowed to go unchecked. And I want to create the kind of world where happiness, as the product of good reasoning, is the norm rather than the minority. Do you think, PowerPoint? But that's not my religion. Those people, the Westboro Baptist Church, and the people dropping their life savings on Rapture Day advertisements, those people are the crazies. It is kind of ironic to hear people say, the people who think the rapture is coming on Saturday, they're crazy. But it's coming. And I'm not crazy. But this is what they're doing. Those people aren't my religion. True. But your reasons for believing you understand the will of God are no better than theirs. And if I'm going to be consistent across the board in holding people to good reasons, I have to hold you to good reasons. I can't tell them they're wrong because their reasons suck and tell you that I don't care that your reasons suck. So why do I continue to assault the most cherished beliefs of some of my neighbors in this country, some of the people I care about who share the world with me? Because bad ideas survive because of bad reasoning. It makes no sense to advance them as the antithesis of the world's problems. And put quite simply, to not criticize those beliefs would be immoral on my part. And even as an atheist, I don't want to live as an immoral human being. There was once a time when happiness meant spending all day on the hunt and all day in the field just so your family had a chance to eat that night. And ever since that time, through nothing more than pure human reason, we have gotten to a point where plentiful food is a reality, where clean water is a reality, where we can spend more time with our families because these things are provided for us, where certain diseases that were once a threat to the human race are little more than a memory. If there is a salvation for humankind, it's not in myth, it's not in Jesus, and it's not in unsupported ideas. It's right here. It's human reason. We have taken dominion of this planet because we took it ourselves, not because it was handed to us by a God, but because we made it ours. This is our obligation into the future if we want to leave a world that's an improvement to the next generation. Our world is a utopia compared to every generation before us, and if that trend is to continue, We have to create a society in which bad ideas are rightly criticized and good ideas continue to be elevated. And that is why I have no other choice but to assault your cherished beliefs. And that's why the conversation has to continue, dear Christian. Thank you.